Second dwelling. Who are the souls that make it through to the second dwelling, and what are they doing here? I realize that I've written about this at great length in other places, but because I can't remember a thing I've said, I'm sure I'll end up repeating a lot of it here. As long as I say it in some new way, I trust you won't mind too much, since most of us never get tired of the multitude of books that deal with matters of the soul. The second dwelling is for those who have already begun to practice prayer and become aware that it's time to move on beyond the dwelling of entry. But they haven't quite developed the fortitude to avoid falling back into occasions for spiritual error. At least now they understand the danger they are in. They will be striving to flee from serpents and poisonous creatures because they have a much clearer sense of how good it is to leave these things behind. Their hope for entering more deeply into the castle is much greater now. But the rooms of the second dwelling are harder to navigate. Souls in the first dwelling have the dubious advantage of being both deaf and dumb. Since they can hear nothing, their inability to speak doesn't bother them much. To be able to hear but unable to say anything is torment. This doesn't mean, of course, that we should yearn for deafness, because it is a wonderful thing to be capable of receiving what is being transmitted to us. These are the souls who hear the Beloved when he calls. They are getting close to the place where His Majesty dwells, and He is becoming a good neighbor to them. We tend to get lost in our worldly affairs, buying and selling, grasping and indulging, falling into spiritual error and rising up again. These kinds of spiritual serpents are so virulent and venomous, so numerous and dangerous, it would be a miracle if we could avoid stumbling over them and falling. Still, this Beloved of ours is merciful and good. Besides, He so deeply longs for our love that He keeps calling us to come closer. This voice of His is so sweet that the poor soul falls apart in the face of her own inability to instantly do whatever He asks of her. And so you see, hearing Him hurts much more than not being able to hear Him. I am not saying that God calls to us directly here as He will do later. For now, His voice reaches us through words spoken by good people, through listening to spiritual talks, and reading sacred literature. God calls to us in countless little ways all the time. Through illnesses and suffering and through sorrow, He calls to us. Through a truth glimpsed fleetingly in a state of prayer, He calls to us. No matter how half-hearted such insights may be, God rejoices whenever we learn what He is trying to teach us. Don't underestimate this first favor, friends, or be overly saddened if you cannot respond instantaneously to the call of the Beloved. His Majesty has no trouble waiting for many days, even years, especially when He sees that we are persevering and that our desires are good. Perseverance brings great gains. But the spirit of evil assaults the soul in 1,000 ways now, and her suffering is deeper than it was before. In the first dwelling, she could hear almost nothing, and she resisted less. She was a warrior who had lost hope of victory. The intellect has sharpened now, and the faculties have grown more skillful. The clash of arms and the explosion of mortar are so intense that the soul cannot help but perceive them. Now the little demons present these serpents, which are worldly attachments and earthly pleasures, as if they were abiding realities. They suggest to the soul that in the world she is appreciated, that her friends and relatives are fond of her, that her impulse towards self-mortification is uncomfortable and unhealthy, and raise 1,000 other theoretical impediments. Oh, Jesus, what an uproar the spirits of evil create here! It is a wonderful thing for the soul to connect with others who walk the way she is walking, who are not only sitting in the rooms she enters, but who knows and have already ventured more deeply toward the center. Conversations with these travelers will be of great benefit to the soul. She can get close enough to them so that they will be able to take her with them. May the soul always cultivate her intention not to be vanquished. If the spirit of evil sees that she is willing to lose her life, her tranquility, and everything else that it can offer, rather than return to the first dwelling, it will soon give up on her. Let the soul be strong. and not behave like those soldiers who knelt down to drink before going into battle. Let her be steadfast as she goes forth to stand against all the minions of unconsciousness raging inside her, knowing that there are no weapons superior to the peace of the cross. If the soul were to be thinking about personal gratification at this stage, it would be a shaky way to build such a great and precious edifice of prayer. When a foundation is made on sand, the whole structure comes tumbling down. Souls seeking consolation will never be free of dissatisfaction and temptation. This is not the dwelling where manna rains from paradise. That comes later, when a soul grows to want what God wants and finds in the manna all that her heart desires. How strange! We still have 1,000 imperfections and impediments. Our virtues are so young that they have barely begun to grow. Thank God they have ever been born. And yet we shamelessly grasp for spiritual satisfaction and complain about spiritual aridity. Please don't be like this, friends. Embrace the cross that your beloved bore on his shoulders and accept it that it is yours also to carry. Let she who is capable of the most intense suffering suffer most intensely for him. Her liberation will be all the more perfect. If God grants you some sweet favor, give heartfelt thanks. This is purely a bonus. It's tempting to think that if God would only grant you internal favors, you would be able to withstand external challenges. His Majesty knows what is best for us. He does not require our opinion on the matter, and, in fact, he has every right to point out that we don't have any idea what we're asking for. Remember, all you have to do as you begin to cultivate the practice of prayer is to prepare yourself with sincere effort and intent to bring your will into harmony with the will of God. I promise you that this is the highest perfection to be attained on the spiritual path. The more perfectly you practice this surrender, the greater the gifts you will receive from the Beloved, and the farther you will advance on your journey. Don't think you have to use esoteric jargon or dabble in the mysteries of the unknown. If we miss the mark right at the beginning, trying to direct things according to our own cravings and hopes that God will cooperate, what kind of base are we laying down for our sacred edifice? Let's do whatever we can to avoid these poisonous little reptiles. Sometimes it actually is God's will that we are plagued by bad thoughts we cannot get rid of and spiritual aridity we cannot alleviate. Sometimes he even lets the serpents bite us to see if we suffer grief for having offended him, and so that we learn to guard ourselves better against future error. And if you fall sometimes, do not lose heart. Keep striving to walk your path with integrity. God will draw out the good even from your fall, just as the man who sells antidotes will drink poison to test their effectiveness. If nothing else could highlight our own misery or reveal to us the harm we are doing to ourselves by living a dissipated life, this battle unfolding inside of us would be enough to bring us back to recollection. What could be worse than not being at home in our own house? What hope do we have of finding rest outside ourselves if we cannot be at ease within? Whether or not we appreciate them, we must always live in close proximity to our faculties. They are our greatest relatives and most faithful friends. And yet, as if they were resentful of the damage of our imperfections have done to them, our faculties seem to be waging war upon us. Peace, peace, Christ says, my friends. He often urged peace upon his own disciples. Believe me, if we don't cultivate peace at home, we will not find it in alien places. End the war. By the blood that he shed for us, I ask that those of you who have not begun to go inside yourselves to enter now, and those who are already in, don't let warfare make you turn back. A relapse is worse than a lapse. You can already see what you lost. Trust more in the mercy of God and less in your own judgment. Then you will see how His Majesty brings you safely from one dwelling to the next and settles you in a land where those wild beasts cannot touch you or do you any harm. You yourself have the power over these creatures. You will laugh at them. You will enjoy more blessings than you ever imagined in this life, I mean. Remember, when you are tormented by the spirit of evil, you cannot recollect yourself by force. Recollection must come gently. Little by little, you will be able to practice prayer for longer periods undisturbed. Don't neglect to consult people with experience so that they can assure you there is nothing wrong with your practice. that you are doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. Even if you encounter no one to teach you, don't give up. The Beloved will guide you on your path. There is no other remedy for the error of quitting your practice except to start up again at the beginning. Otherwise, the soul loses more of herself every day. May it please God, my friends, that you come to understand how this works. Some of you may think that if turning back is so bad, it would be better to have never begun, that you might as well have stayed outside the castle in the first place. I told you right from the start, and Christ himself has said, that whoever walks in danger shall perish in it. The door to this castle is prayer. It is ridiculous to think that we can enter paradise without first entering ourselves. We must get to know ourselves, reflect on our limitations, acknowledge our gratitude for God, and solicit his mercy. Christ, who is love, says, "No one ever gets to the Father except through me," or something like that. He also says, "He who sees me sees my Father." Well, if we never look at him or reflect on what he has given us and the death that he endured for us, then I can't imagine how we will come to know him or do good works in service of him. What is faith worth without works? What are works worth without connection to the goodness of Christ? Who will awaken us to love this Beloved? May His Majesty give us understanding of the magnitude of His sacrifice, reminding us that the servant is not greater than the master, and that we need to exert effort to harvest His glory. And so, we must pray without ceasing and leave temptation behind.